Hi, I am former fundee. Welcome to the channel if you are new. If you are a return viewer, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And if you aren't subscribed, please consider doing so. This video is a continuation of my Pastors and Pray series. However, most individual stories can stand on their own. This one is a continuation of this video, linked in the cards. I am going to give a disclaimer for the following things, which I will now put on screen so I am not saying them out loud in the video. We are going to be looking at the official statement that the Assemblies of God put out during their General Council, which is the official national level meeting that they have with all of the ministers, where they have business sessions, where they vote on changing or updating bylaws, as well as sessions such as this one where you have speakers talking and giving updates about their various fields or areas. And in my opinion, and the opinions that I've seen of a few other people, the response from the Assemblies of God to this situation has been wholly inadequate, intentionally vague, and just falls so short of the right thing. There are so many things that they could do to make this situation better. And as we saw in the last video, they have been withholding important and vital information from the case that the judge requested months ago. And they've just been dragging their feet. Their statement really falls flat for me, but we will get into that.
I am sad and concerned from all of us for the victims who have suffered due to the sexual misconduct engaged in another situation regarding Chi-Alpha. Due to the sexual misconduct of Daniel Savala, several people were harmed. For every victim who has suffered, we are sorry. We are sorry that they have suffered. And we know that Savala engaged in sexual misconduct with male college students who attended Chi-Alpha chapters and sexually abused up to 4 minors, likely over the course of a decade, by gaining access to some of his victims through individuals who also attended or served in local Chi-Alpha chapters in Texas.
Bullshit. Absolute bullshit. One, her apology about how bad she feels for these people who might have been hurt. They aren't actually doing the things that would help, like give the judge the documents that the judge is requesting for the current case.
Whenever this kind of conduct reaches the consciousness of those in the church and involves any aspect of the church, it rightfully elicits anger and anguish. It hurts the church's witness, and it can bring great harm to those who are victimized. This situation is tragic, and our hearts are broken for those who have been hurt and for the families impacted as a result. While these allegations may be new to some of you, they first surfaced to the General Council in the spring of 2023.
The fact that she is claiming that the AG became aware of the situation in 2023 is complete and utter bullshit. So here I will show on screen little bits of this letter here that were written to the superintendent, so the big boss of the Assemblies of God, Doug Clay, and this was sent in June of 2018. In this letter, which technically I misspoke, it's not a letter, it's an email, but this isn't even the first time that they tried to reach out to the superintendent. It says that this is the second attempt to send this email and that they had sent it a week ago. And they were sending it again because it's a serious matter and they received no response. And so why, AG, do you have a general superintendent at ag.org email if you aren't going to have someone responding and looking at the email? Now, I'm sure that for the most part, Doug Clay, the superintendent, isn't the one checking this email. I'm sure it's probably an executive assistant. I guess shame on the executive assistant if they didn't see how important this email was and didn't then send it to Doug Clay. I've been an executive assistant a few times, and I know very well that part of your job when going through these types of email inboxes is finding and flagging the things that your executive needs to look at and respond to ASAP, and then bringing it to their attention. And if I had received this email as an executive assistant, I would have recognized this as a big deal. This person brings up this dangerous man who has a record of hurting people and doing inappropriate things, and also mentioning that they have multiple documents, articles, screenshots, and photos that they can send to back up what they are saying here. So the fact that the Assemblies of God's stance seems to be to claim that they were not aware of this until 2023, that's complete and utter bullshit. And if they truly missed these emails back in 2018, that's a sign of a different type of negligence and mismanagement within their organization. We also have evidence of other emails in 2018, such as one that was sent to Chi Alpha leadership to notify them of this situation. So Chi Alpha, that sub-organization within the Assemblies of God, they had an opportunity to be aware of this and take care of it. So why didn't they do anything? And upon receiving this information, why didn't they notify their parent organization, the Assemblies of God, of what was occurring? But they can't even claim that they missed the email to the general superintendent in 2018 because they responded. Yeah. They acknowledged that they had received the email and responded to it on June 15th of 2018. It says, "Warm Christian greetings. General Superintendent Doug Clay read your email and forwarded it to me for a response since our office oversees credentialed ministers' issues." And while I can't disagree with some of the things that they say in this response, for example, Daniel Savala was never a credentialed minister with the Assemblies of God. So it's not like they could strip him of credentials that he never held or had. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't have done more in this situation. Another thing that they say in this message, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is that if you have knowledge of inappropriate conduct, that you may contact authorities directly, which I think also is an appropriate thing to do. And so this is signed by Donna Barrett herself, who is the one who we just saw claim that the AG was made aware of this situation in 2023. But here we have her exchanging emails about this exact situation in 2018. So, Donna, I'm calling bullshit.
2 years ago, when we were moving into general counsel, the authorities, the general counsel, and 2 districts in Texas were still completing their reviews, and the districts had not made recommendations as to any discipline of those people who had credentials. I can share with you that the general counsel completed a thorough and objective investigation by an outside law firm with experience in these type of matters to determine if general counsel officials acted responsibly and appropriately. The review at the national level focused on what knowledge national officials had, when they had it, and what they did with that knowledge. The attorney had unfettered access to witnesses, emails, documents, law enforcement, and set up an email for reports to be sent directly to him to remain confidential. The attorney interviewed dozens of witnesses, including victims who agreed to participate. The review was not directed by the general counsel. The findings of this investigation were presented to the Executive Presbytery in full. The Executive Presbytery is the body who oversees the business of the General Counsel and has a fiduciary duty as a board of directors would.
Oh, so the attorney that you hired to help you when it came to legal culpability did their job and determined that there was a way for you to avoid legal culpability. Oh, good job. Such a good job. But there's still a lot that you could be doing to help with this case and investigation, such as releasing all of the files you have, some of which would include negligence lawsuits that you settled outside of court. When it came to this, yeah, you could release information about those. You know, if you're so sure that you aren't guilty of any wrongdoing in this situation, then why aren't you sharing your documents with the judge?
The North Texas and South Texas districts also investigated what occurred and recommended the dismissal of ministry credentials of those involved. The General Counsel followed those recommendations. Now, as a voluntary cooperative fellowship, the districts and churches in Texas are separate entities. The General Counsel has influence in the areas of doctrine, the credentialing of ministers, and the chartering of churches. The National Chi Alpha Office is a part of the General Counsel and provides resources to local chapters. But the General Counsel has no legal authority over attendees of local churches and ministries or the policies and procedures they have in place. It did not provide day-to-day supervision of Chi Alpha ministries. Again, though Daniel Savala has had ties to some affiliated ministries and churches, he never held credentials with the Assemblies of God or the General Counsel. He never served on staff of Chi Alpha. And the General Counsel never endorsed him, his teachings, or his activities. Indeed, it does not appear that the General Counsel even knew who he was until 2018.
Oh, so you do admit that you became aware of who he was in 2018. But why are you claiming that you weren't aware of the inappropriateness of the situation until 2023? Get your story straight, Donna.
Savala had long-standing friendships with a handful of local Chi Alpha leaders in Texas who were credentialed ministers. And it appears one of those ministers, Eli Stewart, helped Daniel Savala gain access to young men and to conceal his crimes and his 2012 Alaska conviction. He also convinced some in Chi Alpha that Savala was innocent of those charges. The Alaska conviction, which caused Savala to be classified as a registered sex offender, was based on an incident that had nothing to do with the Assemblies of God.
I don't care. Just because his past conviction didn't have anything specifically to do with the Assemblies of God doesn't mean that it's irrelevant to what happened later under your watch and umbrella. Yes, the General Office of the Assemblies of God, the Superintendent's Office, is not directly overseeing everything that Chi Alpha does. However, Chi Alpha does report to the National Office in terms of oversight and discipline if things do go wrong within their leadership. And so this really just seems like they're trying to dodge responsibility here. And while it is true that the General Counsel could only give recommendations about withdrawing credentials from people because pastoral credentials are handled on the district levels, not the national level, that doesn't mean that they couldn't have come out stronger when they were finding out information about Daniel Savala and his involvement with Chi Alpha in Houston, Texas. because it's not the districts that oversee Chi Alpha. Chi Alpha is under the U.S. Missions umbrella, which is under the General Council of the Assemblies of God. And so when they were made aware that there was a volunteer in a Chi Alpha ministry who was a sex offender, they really could have put the hammer down there. Because they oversee Chi Alpha, they could have been like, no, Houston Chi Alpha, you cannot work with this man. You are not allowed to work with this man, and contact the local authorities over what he's been doing. Especially because, like we heard Donna say herself, some of those victims were minors, and that is illegal. And while Daniel seemed to think he could get away with everything because he was convinced that all of the young men coming in were legally adults and they were coming in of their own free will. He thought he would get away with it, but because some of them were minors, that is against the law. And while I definitely disagree with everything he was doing from a legal standpoint, it is a lot more challenging. It is very difficult to get any type of justice in these types of situations where the waters are muddied. And while we can look at it from the outside and see that he had a very specific pattern of grooming people and then performing inappropriate acts, it becomes very much a he said, she said in a court of law, because he will claim that it was consensual and they were enjoying it. And so while I find what he did overall very disgusting and very inappropriate, legally, it's very hard to catch him on anything other than the inappropriate activity with minors, which is very clearly against the law in all cases.
While Eli Stewart later claimed to have also been deceived, Stewart's influence was undeniably critical in Savala's ability to engage in sexual misconduct and child abuse. In 2018, the National Chi Alpha and General Council leadership received an email about Savala. The email focused on Savala's presence at Easter services at the church Eli Stewart pastored and his presumed presence around college students as a registered sex offender. This report did not allege ongoing sexual abuse in Chi Alpha. In response, the national office notified the district officials and district director of the North and South Texas districts so they could take appropriate steps to warn that Savala not attend Chi Alpha chapter events. But Eli Stewart was both a local chapter leader and the North Texas Chi Alpha director. This position allowed him to continue shielding Savala's involvement, even after being urged by the national office not to have students in contact with Savala.
Okay, I feel like she's incorrect here, just based off of the information that I shared earlier in these letters. It looks like these people did have proof and evidence of ongoing inappropriate activity, even though she's claiming that these notifications did not. And if this is a situation of a specific Chi Alpha leader shielding this person that you know is a registered offender, then why did you not take action against that Chi Alpha missionary? Because you were in the power and position to do so. You could have put a stop there. Sure, maybe you didn't have the ability to strip Savala of credentials, but you could have taken action against the person who was shielding him and allowing this all to continue under his watch.
Again, the General Counsel is unaware of any evidence that the national office had information that any sexual misconduct was occurring in Chi Alpha until 2023.
So the letters, the emails, all the messages that you received from people between 2018 and 2023, when you claim you finally had evidence, you didn't do shit until legal action was occurring. But there were things that you could have done up until then that could have minimized the harm being caused. Because again, you could have removed the Chi Alpha leader who was shielding Savala, and your response that you had no idea, it doesn't follow. It doesn't follow with what we hear from people who were in that situation and who have shared their stories on the Lion's Den forum of all of the things that they did to try to notify the Assemblies of God. So I'm just not buying it, Donna. I think you were a lot more aware than you are admitting now, and I don't think it's a situation of outright malice on the Assemblies of God part. I think it was just them brushing things under the rug, feeling like it wasn't their responsibility because Savala, like I've said multiple times and like they've said, was never a credentialed Assemblies of God pastor. So they probably didn't feel like it was their problem. They maybe just hoped it would go away and people would just shut up about it, but it didn't go away, and they didn't take any tangible action until charges were actually being filed against Savala and his other co-conspirators, many of which who were AG ministers. And this very much echoes the first story in this whole series about Joe and Becky Campbell, and how the Assemblies of God did not revoke Joe Campbell's pastoral credentials until legal action was taken against him, even though years before they had the testimony of multiple children who had experienced inappropriate situations with him. And they chose to believe him over multiple children who wrote out their stories and what happened to them, and a girl who went and spoke directly to the council while Joe and Becky Campbell were in the room to intimidate them. So we just see this pattern of the Assemblies of God just pushing things under the rug, hoping that it'll go away, not wanting to have anything bad associated with them in their name, being very much more interested in protecting their image than they are about actually righting wrongs and doing the correct thing when these situations occur.
In the spring of 2023, a website reported that Savala, a registered sex offender, had sexual contact with college students who attended Chi Alpha groups. Based on the review, this was the first time the General Counsel was informed of specific abuse allegations involving Chi Alpha. It became known that Savala had engaged in sexual misconduct with college students and as many as 4 minors. 2 of these minors were taken to Savala with their father, who also participated in the abuse and was a credentialed minister. He is being criminally prosecuted as well. According to our longstanding process, these actions were promptly reported to local law enforcement. National and district investigations commenced immediately. The North and South Texas districts then made recommendations to the General Counsel related to the credentials of the involved ministers. The General Counsel followed those recommendations. The Credentials Committee approved 6 dismissals recommended by the districts. That's the most severe form of discipline available under AG polity. Another minister's credential was not renewed, and 4 credential ministers were placed in a restoration program with their credentials suspended.
A restoration program. Okay. So my dad was in a restoration program. Fun fact. So I grew up as a PK, a pastor's kid, and my dad was a pastor for the majority of my life. But while I was raising funds for my first term on the mission field, my father was arrested in a sex trafficking sting. Yeah. My dad was in a restorative program. And this is when a AG minister has a moral failing that goes against the organization's rules and bylaws. And during that time, your credentials are suspended. You have to go through some therapy that's really just like led by some other pastors who don't always have counseling credentials of any sort. And my dad failed, I would say, his restorative program, because at the end of it, the decision was made on the district level to cancel his credentials. So they didn't get unsuspended. Instead, they just got outright canceled. And I really think it's because he never admitted really his guilt. If he had been repentant and like, oh yes, I had the plan to do this thing and it was wrong and I now see that it's wrong and I've repented and I'm sorry. I think if he had taken that tactic, he would have passed his restorative program. But since it was always, oh, well, this was the first time I was just going for a massage, I don't think they bought it. They didn't buy it. So he didn't get through. So what I'm saying with this is, with these people who were connected to Savala, who were participating in his disgusting program of grooming young boys, as Savala said himself, naive young men, they're just in a restorative program. So if they cry their crocodile tears and say that they are genuinely sorry, even if they're not, if the person running their restorative program and counseling them through this buys it, they get their credentials right back. And I'm not against redemption outright. I do think people can evolve and change. I myself, I think, is an example of that. I used to be a very, very evangelical fundamentalist Christian in my worldview, in my beliefs, in my political leanings. Part of that was just being very uninformed about a lot of things and a lot of cognitive dissonance, but I've changed a lot since then, and there are things that I used to believe or do in the past that I am now completely disgusted by. And so I do think people can genuinely change and grow and get better, but I think these restorative programs are not the best mechanisms for that. If they have really changed them and very much enforced that the counselors have to be actual licensed professionals, then I think that's a step in the correct direction. But I know in the past that on the district level, which is where these restorative programs occur, they don't necessarily have the standards of counseling and care that I think would be required for a restorative program.
2 lawsuits were filed. One has been settled. The other is pending. Discovery is ongoing in the litigation, which limits the extent of information that can be provided in this setting. Information in the investigation includes victims' identities and personal details, and it isn't appropriate to release more information more broadly. There is no perfect solution, but public disclosure of the entire investigation deters individuals from reporting allegations of misconduct or participating as witnesses for fear that their information will be disseminated broadly with no guardrails.
Donna, it's called redacting. And I feel like your whole tirade here, while you're trying to make it about publicly putting out all the information. I think this is you trying to obfuscate your feet dragging when it comes to giving this information to the judge who has ordered you to release it for the case. I think if you are redacting victims' names and the personal identifying information properly, I don't think then releasing files and information about what occurred deters other victims from coming forward. I think if you do the proper redactions to protect identity, I think victims who haven't come forward but then see the statements and testimonies of ones who have, I think that's going to encourage them that it's okay for them to come forward as well. And while she is making this particular claim, I think the Lion's Den Forum is the perfect example that it's actually the opposite of what she's claiming. Because in the forum, you have people whose identities are protected because they're going under a screen name instead of their legal name, except in the cases when they decide to share their names. And they are sharing what happened with them. And because of them sharing, it has made it possible for other people who have experienced the same to come forward. And in the last video, even situations where parents come across the forum and realize that their young adult son was attending that Chi Alpha and was interacting with Daniel Savala. And so we've seen situations of it being beneficial and it inspiring more people who have experienced the same to come forward, and not the opposite like she is trying to claim now.
There are no words that can capture the sorrow we feel for those targeted and impacted by this.
It's okay, Donna. We don't need or want your words. What we want are appropriate actions. And that appropriate action would be sharing your documentation with the judge who has requested it from you. Actions speak so much louder than words, Donna. So just do the right thing. Do the right thing.
I want to talk to you about communication. The flow of communication from the national office is based on several factors that leadership is responsible to steward. It can be challenging in a world of digital communication, Facebook, digital petitions, and groups hosting podcasts with partial or inaccurate information, even if misrepresented in public forums.
Oh, Donna. Just because representation of you is negative within the Lion's Den Forum, that doesn't mean it's a misrepresentation. The people in the forum are being way more transparent than the Assemblies of God is right now with the information that they have. And from my own personal experience of being within the Assemblies of God, the experience of these people who were in Chi Alpha, who have shared in the forum, and the experiences of the support group that I found out about and joined not too long ago, which I'll talk about in another video, that is just full of former Assemblies of God missionaries who experienced spiritual abuse on the field. I don't think it's a misrepresentation, Donna. I think the things that all of these people are saying, when you put all of these stories together, among all of these people who were formerly in Chi Alpha, among all of these people who were either formerly in missions or currently a part of Assemblies of God World Missions, when you take a look at all of these stories and the commonalities and the inaction of the Assemblies of God on the general council level, it's not a misrepresentation just because it's not what you want to hear, Donna. No, it's a very clear picture of negligence, of looking the other way, of brushing things under the rug so that the organization can maintain a nice, squeaky clean look. But that is falling apart as people come forward and talk about the abuse that they've experienced in various areas within the Assemblies of God, whether that is in missions, home missions, campus ministries like Chi Alpha, or local churches and organizations on the district levels. It's just a very widespread problem that, because of all of the past inaction, all of the past of brushing things under the rug, of ignoring it, hoping it'll go away, you've created a monster. Because all of these things, all of these problems just continued to fester and grow. And now you've got something that you can't handle anymore. Something that you can't just discreetly brush under the rug and pray goes away. And I think it'll be very interesting to see in the years to come what they decide to do going forward. Are they going to continue their tactic to, on the public stage, say that they are so sorry for all of the people who may have experienced hurt, but don't actually do anything that helps get justice for these people? Or are they going to take a turn and actually properly investigate all of the bad things that have been happening and take real appropriate action and change course? That is where I am going to wrap up this installment of Pastors and Pray. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Assemblies of God's response to this situation. Do you think it's adequate or appropriate? Let me know why, if you do. Or do you, like me, agree that it's inadequate and that actions speak so much louder than words and they are not backing up their words with the appropriate actions? But I hope you have a wonderful day and an awesome week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. You gotta stop bumping the mic, bud.